When you think of the most famous comic artists of the 2000s, it's very hard not to think of Brian Hitch, an artist whose style is mainly described to be cinematic. His widescreen-like pages would eventually land him work as a movie concept artist, and his work with Mark Millar on Ultimates 1 and 2 are clear inspirations to what eventually would become the MCU. But before the MCU, Hitch would actually have a pretty big role in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. Stay tuned to find out how. And let's ask the question, can they Spider-Man? The series where I analyze artists that draw the famous webhead and whether they've been drawing him for years or draw him for fun. I let you know whether or not I think they can Spider-Man. Hitch would break into the industry fairly young in the late 80s and would work on DC and Marvel titles all throughout the 90s, finding big success with the DC title The Authority, and as I mentioned, even more success on the Ultimates, the ultimate version of the Avengers with Mark Millar. Although the Ultimates comics have come to be a bit controversial and unliked nowadays, one thing that can't be denied is how brilliant Hitch's artwork was for this series. From there wasn't really a character that Hitch wouldn't draw. He worked on legendary team books like Fantastic Four and JLA, but even with all that, Spider-Man wasn't really a character that Hitch would tap fully into. But I will say, from the comic examples we do have, it's clear that we missed out on an amazing prime Hitch working on Spider-Man. Hitch was inspired by artists like Kurt Swan, as he enjoyed the natural look of his art, and that is exactly what Hitch would try to emulate with his art, paying attention to detail, adding a bit of realism to the overall style to really make it feel, well, real. With a character like Spider-Man, adding a hint of realism just honestly adds to the overall experience. I personally love his anatomy for the webhead. It's a great build overall, and the poses he's able to display Spidey in are great in my opinion. He's constantly got him in a cool and unique pose, and although at times it can seem a little bit extra, it follows back to his main objective of having it feel natural. The movement is so natural that you could even say it could inspire actual movement in, say, a live action movie, but let's put a pin in that for now. I personally love that Hitch's Spider-Man is also super recognizable. When I see his Spider-Man, I almost always know it's his. When looking at the anatomy, one of the key factors for me is the way he curves Spider-Man's legs. Sounds silly, I know, but it's sort of a gymnast look to the body that gives it away and overall is a great fit for the character. It's never dull or boring, and much like his other work, pops out of the page to grab your attention. But speaking of popping out of the page, let's actually do that and move to a more digital side of things. Hitch would actually play a huge role in bringing Spidey's acrobatics and swings to the big screen. But even before the movie's release, his Spider-Man was seen everywhere, and that's because Hitch was the man behind the 2002 film's marketing. His promo art was on anything Marvel and Sony could slap it on. T-shirts, cereal, lunchboxes, covers. The promo art was huge. And with that, Hitch's Spider-Man has kind of always reminded me of John Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man. Obviously, the styles are quite different, but the overall look of his Spider-Man Peter Parker seems like the mature type like Senior's was. And then you add the overall fact that they both had their Spider-Man specifically plastered all over different types of merchandise. It's a similarity that I just can't help but to notice. And to me, this is hands down some of Hitch's best work overall. Mixing in some digital art, they would normally be displayed with a real photo background. Now, obviously, the digital painted approach to these are a little bit different than Hitch's normal comic work, but that's Hitch's pencil work through and through, as well as his dynamic poses that strike the attention of any viewer. You even get some great action and fight pieces with the Green Goblin, and to me, I'm just gonna say it, this looks even better than the movie. I know, crazy to say, but as I mentioned, Hitch would have a big role in the actual movies, and that's because Sony would animate the Spider-Man CGI to move like Hitch's artwork and choreography. His artwork, both in promo and sketch, were the reference points to how a lot of Spider-Man swing scenes and in general action moving scenes would play out. Hitch actually recalls all of this in an interview with Mark Millar, stating,
"First job they actually got me to do was licensing art for the first Spider-Man movie, the Tobey Maguire movie. So I did all these drawings because they hadn't got any images from the movie, because they couldn't figure out, actually, as it turned out, how to make Spider-Man work in the CG stuff, because they were making him swing around like Batman. I'd done this series of drawings that were then digitally painted for lunchboxes and tablecloths and T-shirts and stuff. It was literally everywhere. It was amazing. But until I went to see the movie, and when Tobey Maguire, the end, so he's at the graveside, and then just before the final credits roll, there's a scene of Spider-Man swinging through the streets. It was the key. ILM used it as keyframe art. All my drawings used those keyframes.
It's crazy because there's even some reference points that are basically one for one. You probably saw it on the thumbnail, but these two images right here literally are inspiration to creation. I appreciate the level of understanding Hitch has for the character. One of the coolest things of Spider-Man is how he moves, and Hitch makes that movement feel realistic with his artwork. Personally, I think we were robbed of not having a prime Hitch work on some sort of Spider-Man title. However, some of those covers from like Sinister War and Venom still looks really great and definitely pop. But even with him not working so much on the character on the comic side, his influence and impact for the character is still massive, as I mentioned with that promo art. But what do you guys think of Bryan Hitch? Are you a fan of his Spider-Man art? What do you think of the 2002 promo art? I'm telling you, man, this is hands down some of the best Spider-Man artwork, and definitely it's nostalgic, but it's also just so crisp, so clean. Sound off in the comments down below, and thanks so much for watching. Subscribe for more.